Hello again, and welcome to the Soccer Media Podcast. We're here weekly with an inside look at the soccer media business and the business of soccer. We're presented by Soccer America and produced by the John Shrader Media Group. Our interview guest this week is Jen Cooper, the stats manager and historian for the National Women's Soccer League, NWSL, and researcher for Fox Soccer. So you work regularly with folks like JP Dellacamera, who I've known for a long time and who was just on this podcast recently. So
Yes.
You're a regular conversationalist with JP.
Oh, we text all the time about different stats. And when I've had the pleasure of being in booth with JP, especially for U.S. games, when they used to have U.S. games on Fox, what I loved is that he could say, hey, could you look up? And before he finished his question, he already had the answer in his head because he could remember all the games he called. Mm-hmm. And so he's one of the few people I've run into where I can reference a random U.S. women's game in 2003 and he'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Jen is doing more than double duty this weekend with the first round of playoffs. On Prime Friday night, it's Seattle at Orlando. On Saturday, it's CBS television, Louisville at Washington. 2 games Sunday on ABC. Gotham FC is at Kansas City, and Portland is hosting San Diego. More on the women's game and working with Fox with Jen Cooper coming up in just minutes. Now time for Mike's trivia question.
Thank you, John. For today's Soccer America trivia question, we're going to the NWSL, which later this month will crown its 12th champion. Of the previous 11 champions, how many of those teams were coached by women head coaches, and how many of those 11 teams were coached by American-raised coaches? Stay tuned for the answer later in the show.
Did you know your Soccer America membership includes a daily soccer television schedule delivered in your inbox every morning? I've depended on it for years to follow games from all corners of the world. For a 30-day free trial of Soccer America, and it includes all the e-letters, go to www.socceramerica.com. That's /free trial. That's socceramerica.com /free trial. As advertised, the executive editor of Soccer America, Mike Oitala, is with us. And, well, any time of the year, Mike is busy, but particularly busy and a busy weekend for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Soccer doesn't have any breaks, but I had a fantastic weekend. I'm here in Nashville, and I got to see Leo Messi play live for the second time in 2 weeks. This time Nashville won, so they get to play another game. They're still alive in the playoffs. Terrific atmosphere. It was a drizzling rain, but the crowd here is super. And then the next morning I woke up and for some reason, I looked up tickets for the Tennessee Titans and they were available for $22. So I spent that afternoon at an NFL football game. It was kind of interesting. First of all, the tickets for the Nashville game, I got the cheapest ones so I could take my wife. And that's not why I got the cheapest ones, but it wasn't. They were $100, and the NFL tickets were $23. It was a good game, the NFL game, but one of the things that was really hit home is when you're live at a football game, it is so different than a soccer game. We had 4 TV timeouts in the first quarter. The first quarter of the NFL game ended at the same time that the halftime came in the soccer game the day before, and it really struck you that one of the great things about soccer is that the rhythm of it, and that it doesn't get interrupted by commercials, and when it's good, you don't have those breaks, and you're going to go home at a certain time, and not be there for 4 hours. So it was a great weekend, and just really looking forward to seeing what else happens in the MLS playoffs.
I was joking around with some folks in the press box the other day, and I said, think about this. If 10 years ago, you would have said that a baseball game would last 2.5 hours and a football game would last 3.5 hours, people would have looked at you kind of funny. A soccer match lasts 2 hours. So there are very few sporting events in America now that last as long as an NFL game, and the college games are getting to be just as bad. But
Well, exactly, and that's a big attribute of soccer. It came up during the '94 World Cup. People really liked that. They liked the
mhm.
uninterrupted. That was the first World Cup that was in the United States that wasn't interrupted on English language TV with commercials. And the people that weren't familiar with soccer, whether they were watching on TV or went out to one, they really liked the fact that it was 2 45-minute halves. You had the halftime, and they knew when they were going to go home. It's a great attribute. I think 90 minutes I think it's a good time for movies too, as long as movies over 90 minutes unless they're epics. I always think I think 90 minutes is the perfect time.
Whatever you think of Woody Allen, he was the king of the 90-minute movies, 88 to 100 minutes or so. In fact, we just watched a 94-minute movie last night, and it was crafted beautifully. Hey, speaking of Messi, he's still in the playoffs, Son still in the playoffs, Mueller. How important is it that these superstars in Major League Soccer are still here, and we're talking about them in November?
I think it's great. I think one thing that probably is a factor is that players who come to MLS know that it's not going to be easy. They know it's a high level league. The teams now know that they're not going to sign an older player if they sense that this guy's here for a vacation. I also think that the players we're talking about, like Thomas Müller and Messi, who are older, are guys who are so fit, who've taken care of themselves. Medical science is better now, training methods are better, so it's not that big a deal if you have a player who's in his older 30s when he's ambitious and he wants to prove himself, and they're proving themselves in the playoffs, and to have them in the playoffs is great. The playoffs has been exciting. And it's been great for the league. I mean, Thomas Müller, I think, is I wasn't sure what to expect from him. You can tell. I've watched him for a long time. I figured he had a good chance, but it's good to see that he really did fit in quick, and he has such a positive impact on that team. If you've ever seen him, off the field, you can just tell what a great sense of humor he has that goes with his ambition and his drive. So Vancouver's looking real good.
We have the superstar researcher, Jen Cooper, coming up to talk in just a bit as the NWSL playoffs get started. And I know you've known Jen for a while.
I'm so glad Jen's on the show, and I can't wait to hear her. We had a connection, just an odd family connection. So we had heard of each other a long time ago. And since then, I kept meeting people, and they kept saying, "Oh, you got to meet Jen Cooper. She's amazing. She's involved in so many, parts of soccer." And, she's I'm sure, as you've noticed when you talk to her, is that she's a genius when it comes to soccer knowledge, and also the statistics and history, and just such a great person to have in our game.
She's more than just a stats manager, which is her title with the NWSL, but she publishes an almanac, and she's a historian. And it's kind of cool to see people who sort of started out sort of amateur in soccer make a career out of it, make a living out of it by proving that they can bring something that nobody else has.
And she did grassroots building of soccer,
mm-hmm.
In Houston. She had a major impact. Very much looking forward to hearing her.
Well, she's coming right up, Jen Cooper, and I know you'll enjoy that. And Mike, we'll see you next time.
Looking forward to it.
Jen Cooper is a broadcast researcher for several outlets, including Fox Sports, NBC, NWSL. And we're going to talk a little bit about what Jen does and why and how and the whole process. And so I'll start with thanking you, Jen, for your time. I appreciate it.
Oh, always happy to talk soccer, NWSL, stats, all of it.
And you happy to talk about yourself too?
I can do that as well.
Okay, well, we'll do all of that then. All right. So let's just start with this. You've been in and around the soccer game for a long time. That's correct?
Pre-'99 Women's World Cup, correct.
Okay. So how did you get into the soccer world?
Well, probably like a lot of people my age in the U.S., watching the 1994 World Cup changed everything. I had never seen that level of soccer before. I grew up as a swimmer, tennis player, watching the traditional American sports on TV. That was my first real exposure to soccer. I was vaguely aware of it. I knew who Pele was, right? And I had friends that played club soccer, but that was the first real impact for me of, wow. And I had started playing recreationally at that point, after college, but that made me want to be a goalkeeper. So at the age of 26, I learned how to play goalkeeper because Thomas Ravelli of the Swedish national team I was just mesmerized. And that changed everything for me. Instead of soccer being, okay, it's this thing I do with my friends on the weekend, I became our team rep that went to the league meetings, became league vice president, started running the tournament, became the league president. And the first year I was president was the 1999 Women's World Cup. And we all know what happened then. And at the same time, my alma mater was adding women's soccer. So I got involved as a booster there. And fast forward a few years later, and it was actually 20 years ago this Christmas, I got the best Christmas present ever. I got the call that, hey, San Jose is moving to Houston. Houston's getting an MLS team. And I've been involved, locally hardcore ever since.
Okay, this is where I have to say, and maybe you can see over my shoulder there, the San Jose Clash, who became the Earthquakes, who at one time in San Jose were the Earthquakes way back when. Well, the Earthquakes became the Houston Dynamo. They took their 2 championships to Houston, won 2 more championships in Houston. So your win was the loss of many of my friends. I want you to say that.
But they didn't take your 2 stars from 2001 and 2003. The league was so clear. I remember this, that they're like, no, we're leaving those stars in San Jose because we expect soccer to be back in San Jose. And boom, somebody took the owner of the Oakland A's to the World Cup in 2006, and San Jose got soccer again.
So San Jose got soccer again, but they still only have those 2 stars.
I wasn't going to say that.
And the Dynamo have those 2 stars. And there were a handful of those players. Not that a lot of people listening to this care for us to go down memory lane, but there were a handful of players who won the 2 stars in San Jose and the 2 stars in Houston.
Or at least 3 of the 4.
At least 3 out of 4.
I mean, when I say that was the best Christmas present ever, I mean, I have to add, Houston inherited the best team in the league. They were the 2005 Supporter Shield winners that, went out in the first round of the playoffs. And, that core stayed together, so those first 4 or 5 years in Houston were amazing. And that's never going to happen again, right? Like that was such a specific point in time. Because now if you want to enter the league, and this is true for NWSL and other leagues, like there has to be a plan, a long launch. You have to have a stadium plan already, where at the time, and I mean, this tells you how different the landscape was, MLS was just looking for, is there a potential for a venue and a local owner?
Yeah. I mean, it is almost crazy. It is crazy to think that the best team in the league packs up and moves someplace else.
Yeah.
And everybody knew that. And Dominic Kinnear was the coach in Houston, had been in San Jose, and had played in the Bay Area and had a handful of players. Houston added some other players as well. It's just absurd. And you're right. It wouldn't happen, shouldn't have happened. It hasn't happened in other places.
And will never happen again.
Yeah.
But it changed my life. And that's how I got to meet people that now I'm working with today, like Stu Holden. The first season of the Dynamo, was his first season in MLS. I remember very clearly the night he stepped on the field and scored his first MLS goal. And it's just, I love that now in my broadcast work, I'm meeting all of these people that either I, knew tangentially through working in soccer, or I just watched them. And so their entire career is in my head, and they don't seem freaked out about that.
So let me go back for just a second here. How did you then turn? We got a little bit of an inkling of that.
Right.
But you go from 1994 World Cup, getting this attention, 99 Women's World Cup, now ups it like a whole new level, right? At what point did you realize you could actually work in the business?
Well, so Dynamo was the start of that, but I was working in an operational capacity. I ran the volunteer program, did a lot of operational event stuff. Being a graphic designer by trade, I was doing the media guide, and I was already, there was my inclination towards tracking stats, tracking history. We made sure to have a page that was, here's all the Dynamo jerseys of each year. And had never been exposed to the TV side, didn't know what was behind the scenes. And it wasn't until the Dash came around in 2014 that I had the opportunity to do more on that, because there was all of those games when NWSL was happening then were YouTube, right? So the teams were just doing their own streams. I was recommended to be, hey, she could be an analyst because she knows so much about women's soccer, right? Like, we can teach her all the other stuff about how to do this stuff live, but she knows women's soccer. And I got to work with Sebastian Salazar, who at the time was the sideline reporter for the Dynamo. So, he was like, I've got play-by-play. I'll help you with everything else. You've got women's soccer. You can help me look good for that, right? So I ended up building, for our benefit, just started tracking a lot of the stats, because the league didn't have that. I mean, we forget when we look at NWSL now and how amazingly big it's become, that the whole reason this league started was so that U.S. soccer could have all the players domestically and didn't have to do residency camps. They would just know, hey, there's a league for them here, so they can stay here, and that we have a pool here. There was no grand vision, in a way that MLS had a vision from the beginning of it. We're hoping to be, this long term. U.S. soccer was just looking at, like, hey, we'll pay for the national team players. We just want them to have somewhere to play, right? So it really wasn't till post-COVID that NWSL became, what we know it is now. But so back then, it's like there wasn't a lot of information coming from the teams themselves. So I started collating that. I started sharing that with the announcers that did any national games. There were maybe 4 or 5 national TV games a year. And so that's how I became known to those people, is like, oh, she has all this information. This is really great, And 2017 comes around, and for the first time, the league has a real broadcast deal. A&E Networks bought 25% of the league, and was showing one game a week on Lifetime, and then was streaming all the others. And I remember getting an email just randomly from the senior VP of A&E saying, hey, I've listened to your podcast. I've bought your almanac, because I'd started putting all the stats together in an almanac. Would you want to come on board and be our researcher for these weekly games? And I had no idea that was a thing, but that's a thing. Yeah. And so I did that on top of my regular job. I was managing a soccer retail store. And then that summer, I got an email from Allie Wagner. She was one of the announcers, saying, hey, would you want to work the World Cup? And I was just like, is this a real text? Like, yes. So she connected me with her editorial director at Fox, and a couple of long soccer conversations later, I had, a gig for the 2018 World Cup. I mean, not a permanent job, but a gig for that. And so I took a chance that, okay, I've made enough contacts. I can keep building that. The league is growing. So very long story short, all these years later, and again, when you look at the growth of this league, and that it's at 14 teams, it'll be at 16 teams next year, and there's 4 media partners, soon to be 5. Like, there's a lot to keep on top of. So that's my main role these days, almost year round, is just helping the league stay on top of big milestones, matchup history, playoff scenarios, making sure the broadcasters have all the resources they need, especially as new teams come on board. It's a little easier for them nowadays to have their own history altogether, right? But those first few years of NWSL are still kind of problematic to access, so they always want to check, hey, is this the first time X has happened? Or when is the last time X has happened? And there's just so many great stories in this league. I mean, of course, through all soccer, but it's like making sure that those get amplified as well.
So you work regularly with folks like JP Dellacamera, who I've known for a long time and who was just on this podcast recently. So
yes.
You're a regular conversationalist with JP.
Oh, we text all the time about different stats. And when I've had the pleasure of being in booth with JP, especially for US games, when they used to have US games on Fox. What I loved is that he could say, hey, could you look up? And before he finished his question, he already had the answer in his head because he could remember all the games he called. Mm-hmm. And so he's one of the few people I've run into where I can reference a random US women's game in 2003 and he'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
So you're a little bit alike. So you spend almost your entire waking hours thinking about, researching, digging into numbers, looking up stories, looking up backstories, finding anecdotes. I mean, that's just a little bit of what you do?
Yeah. I mean that sums it up really well. It's collecting all those stories, keeping all those stories. Thankfully my memory has been really strong, though I feel like I'm losing my memory except for soccer, right? Like it's a saving place for soccer up here.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Lucky you.
And a lot of it has been to like, okay, what's the best way to deliver this information to the announcers, especially when we have multiple feeds for one game, right? There's always a domestic feed, a world feed. Sometimes there's a radio feed. So there's a little bit of tech, but very, very light tech involved of, there's so much information. We don't want to overwhelm them with information, but we want them to have key information at their fingertips when they need it. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy too, is just kind of thinking about like, especially that, I called games for 5+ years, it's like, okay, what do I need when, and what's too much? But also thinking about how are people looking at the information? Are they looking at it on their phone, on their laptop,
Right. When do you actually get to work right next to the announcers? And then how does that process work?
It's much less often now, especially post-COVID, right? Like when I worked the Olympics for NBC summer 2021, that was my first time to work the Olympics. COVID protocols were still pretty strict. So all the stat support, we were in a completely separate room from the announcers that were in their announce booth that were also separate from their producers, but they were all connected, via iPad. When I do get the privilege of being in the booth, it's partially being an extra set of eyes, right? Because when you're on site, right, say like I was at the San Diego game in September where they retired Alex Morgan's jersey, so for Jen Hildreth and Leanne Sanderson to be on site, there's so much more going on that they need to be aware of and that could possibly distract them compared to if they were calling that game off tube, in a booth somewhere else, right? And they're also getting guests coming into the booth. So it's the support there is very different from if they're calling off tube. Generally, I don't need to be sitting next to someone calling off tube, right? Yeah. I can be anywhere sending them the info as long as I have, access to the live stream. I like to, since I'm based in Houston, obviously, if Dash are playing, it benefits me to be there while I'm sending the stats to wherever they're calling the game from, because I can see quicker, oh, someone's going over to warm up, or, oh, this is what the issue is, or, stuff like that.
There's a number of us of vintage, not you, but me, who remember the old television days where literally these shows would be in sort of small studios and they're working together, and the producer is almost an arm's length and you can almost touch the person. When you do have the event, let's say the World Cup, let's say you're working the World Cup in Qatar, which you did, right? Now, how are you very nearby if Holden says, hey, I need something, or Lala says, wait a second, my memory's not as good as yours, help me. Are you literally that close where you could just walk up and give it to them personally?
So, well, Qatar was a great situation for us. So we had that wonderful set right on the Corniche on the water. And research, we had a little nook on that set. Sometimes if they panned away from a distance, you could see us in the corner, but it was great because I could make eye contact with anybody on the desk. It would be easy to hand them something if they needed it. And of course we're all on comms, right? So it wouldn't matter if, Alexi was out of earshot I could talk to him or he could talk to me.
I mean, folks, for folks who don't know exactly what you mean, is that you all have headsets on and they have IFBs,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
can literally talk to each other. Even if you were 3,000 miles away, you could talk to each
Right.
other. Yeah.
Right. And the trick is when there's a lot of people all there at the same time, like, okay, I don't want everybody's mic on. I don't need to hear all the conversations at the same time.
Yeah, thanks.
But that was such a great setup because my role that World Cup ended up mostly supporting Rob Stone, especially with how compressed that schedule was, and we had the days with 4 games a day, and we're all on set the whole day, and just like the updates he would want after each half. So I just became the person that would just keep feeding that to them, and you learn what announcers want, what info, right? And obviously they've all done their research beforehand, but once the tournament gets started, it's like, well, wait, who did better in the previous game? Or I'll get something from our boss like, oh, we heard that the US ran more in their first game than any other team ran, distance wise.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't want to just say that. They want us to double check that. So it's, okay, we'll find that. And then it's like, okay, who is that for? Okay, that's for Rob. Oh, no, that's for Alexi. Oh, that's for Carly. So it's figuring out who likes what, who does what. Also sometimes giving them choices, when they might have extra time. You probably remember the Copa America last summer where Argentina took like an extra minute to come out of the locker room for the second half.
Mm-hmm.
And they got fined for it. They just took forever, right? And the other teams like standing on the field waiting. And I had made a little bullet list for Rob Stone of just, here's some random cup of stuff if you need it. And later he's like, thank God you had that.
Really?
It helped me fill time, because normally, when the teams are walking out, the person in Rob's role just has to say, all right, and they're walking out, and and they're handing it off to the announcers. And like, it was the longest handoff in the history of soccer.
We will continue our conversation with Jen coming up in just a minute. Did you know when you join Soccer America, you get a daily Soccer on TV schedule delivered to your inbox every morning? I've been using it for a long time. I check out the games from all over the world. What do I want to watch today? What would I like to watch tomorrow? Also, you get expert analysis, insider interviews, and in-depth coverage of the biggest games. Try it for free for 30 days at socceramerica.com/free trial. That's socceramerica.com/free trial. And while you're here, check the links in the description to sign up for notifications for when our new episodes drop. How do you build a trust in these relationships? Because you absolutely have to have trust. The play-by-play or the studio or the producers or whatever it is, they need to know that when they go to Jen Cooper, what they're getting from her is exactly what we need, and it's right on the money. And that takes a certain amount of trust. And how do you build that?
Well, first I have to say the advice I got before the first World Cup, I worked in Russia 2018 for our boss, was just invaluable. That he said, I'd rather have it 1 second late and be correct than on time and wrong. So don't let the time aspect, make a make a really bad mistake. And there's also you've got to work together with your other researchers, right? Like, hey, I have this, will you double check it?
Mm-hmm.
So that the announcers know, it's like, no, we're not pulling this, out of a hat. And I can also tell how much research, how much homework they've done based on their questions, right? So they're not just, animatronic dolls that are out there that we're filling stats to, right? They're
What?
like,
They're not? They're not just talking heads?
Yeah. So it's like they have thoughts and opinions and ideas. And in our production meetings, a couple hours before we go on air, someone's like, well, I want to talk about this. Have you seen any stats related to this? Right. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but one of the things that I realized early on was that my history with the game, having watched it so religiously since 1994, made it easier for me to connect with announcers like Lexi, Landon, Stu, et cetera. I mean, Stu already knew me, but that I knew their history and could acknowledge their history in a non-scary, not a fangirl way, but just like the one game I worked in the booth with Landon, it was a Dynamo playoff game, and it was John Strong and Stu Holden and Landon, and they were just talking about their favorite MLS playoff games all time. And I just said, well, Landon, my favorite by far is San Jose coming back from a 4-0 deficit to win 5-4 in 2003. And he looked at me, and like his whole body relaxed, and he smiled. Like you could tell he was just going into a reverie. Like, I loved that game, and it's that kind of thing. So I would like to think that it signals to them that they know that I'm very much in it for the love. Right. Mm-hmm. And on the women's side, especially, it's been fun getting to work with players that I've watched, for a long time. And it's, it means a lot to me that someone like Carly will be like, okay, so did I have more penalty kicks for the national team, or did Abby? And so I'll pull up my laptop, and she's really interested in seeing. It's like, oh, I remember that one, So it's like they know that I respect the game and that I love the game, right?
Okay, now you need to know all of this stuff, and you need to get it now. Where in the world does it all come from, and how do you gather all this information and keep it in some order, some semblance? I mean, maybe a lot of it is up here in your head, and maybe it's not, but where does it all come from? How do you get all this stuff?
Well, one, it depends on what kind of soccer we're talking about. So if it's men's soccer, oh my God, it's so easy to find almost anything you need, right?
Yeah.
You might have to dig a little deep, but we know that the media coverage of men's soccer has been thorough for a long, long
Mm-hmm.
time, right? So I remember heading into Moscow 2018, I was so nervous that I didn't know as much about the Men's World Cup.
And this was your first World Cup.
Yeah, that was
working for Fox.
But I realized pretty quickly, it's like, oh, no one's expecting me to be encyclopedic about it, but knowing where to go for the right information,
Mm-hmm.
having a sense of like, I already knew the general stuff of like, oh, this is when it became a 24-team tournament. This is when penalty kicks started. This is how elimination works. These are, that. So the framework was easy. So it's just like, okay, when's the last time a team came from 2-0 down to win 3-2? So it's like, I know how to scan, for that information. Mm-hmm. On the women's side, a lot of that stuff is still missing. And that's why, again, going back to what I started when I was calling NWSL games, I'm like, it's not out there. I'm going to build it myself. So whether that's my almanac or the myriad Google Sheets that I have, or the crowdsourcing I've done. I mean, I've been collecting over the years many soccer stat friends, and so every net, like, we have this bizarre text thread where just randomly it's like, okay, in 2014, did you have this player scoring at this minute or this minute against this team? Right. So like you can tell someone's like deep in their records and just noticed a discrepancy and wants to check it against someone else. Yeah. Right. Now, all of that said, it has been getting a lot better. The coverage of women's stuff, the info, I can tell FBref and other sources like that are going back and adding older data as they find it. It's frustrating that even modern information, like, for the Women's World Cups, like, we never get caps for any of the African countries. And it's so frustrating. Like, FIFA doesn't even try, right? And we all think that FIFA tracks all that stuff. No, they don't. They just rely on the federations to do themselves. Mm-hmm. So for whatever reason, the African federations haven't, stayed on top of that. A lot of the Central American and Caribbean federations. And again, this all comes to money. This isn't lack of care. This is, it's like, there's got to be somebody that's staying on top of that. And you would assume that, oh, U.S. soccer must have great records for that. It's like, not necessarily. I mean, especially if you're just someone who's randomly trying to find the info, the U.S. soccer website isn't going to give you everything you need to know. You'll have to keep digging. Whereas I can go to Iceland, Canada, Norway, Sweden, Germany, and find the caps and goals for every player that ever played for those national teams, find the lineup for every game they've ever played, going back to the 60s,
Wow.
So, and it's the kind of thing that, I realize now why most of our research team is, over a certain age, where it's like, it's the knowledge that you build up over time of not just remembering things, but knowing where to look when there is, that kind of question. Thankfully for the World Cup, FIFA does put out excellent pre-tournament documents of like, here's the 10 youngest players to ever score. Here's the oldest to play for every team. Here's, so you have a lot of those things ready, and over the years, I've built out some lists and, but it is still frustrating to find areas where, like, 2022, someone had put out on social media that Messi has more assists in a World Cup than anybody else. And Fox asked us to double check that. There's no way to double check that because the World Cup didn't track assists before like late 70s.
Yeah. So,
so it's like, yeah. So sometimes you'll say, since the group stage began, this is the record.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. This question and answer requires some immodesty. Okay. So I want to warn you.
Okay.
Are you essentially developing kind of a Bible for women's soccer information, U.S. specifically, maybe, but maybe worldwide, or maybe the men as well? But do you feel like somebody has to do it, and so you're the one whose job it is to put all this together? You have an almanac. Are you sort of creating a Bible? Maybe it's an interactive one, and maybe it's ongoing and updatable and all those things. But do you feel like that's what you're doing? And if so,
I do.
Are you called to that?
I feel like this is my life's work. Yes. I had a great phone call from Aaron Heifetz, the press officer for U.S. Soccer, a few months ago, saying, "Hey, I have to, clean out my Chicago office, right? Because U.S. Soccer is moving their headquarters to Atlanta. He goes, I have all these old WSA publications and videotapes and duplicates of U.S. Soccer media guides. Would you want any of this?" I'm like, "All of it. Send it. All of it. I'll take all of it."
So I will boxes of this. Huh?
Oh, it was so great. When I came home and there were 5 boxes on the stoop, I'm like, oh my gosh. And one box was all VHS tapes of San Diego Spirit stuff from
Do you have a
the
player?
Early aughts. I have a converter, and I've slowly started converting these to digital, and I've started sharing them back with Aaron, and it's just like amazing stuff. Especially it's the world that we don't remember anymore, the pre-social media world, where any media you did was going to be TV or radio, right? That was how you got the word out. So there was so much TV, at least what San Diego did, and I've lived in these stats and stories for so long that now I do feel like it's my life's work, and I'm working on, my plan is to sometime in 2026 publish a Women's World Cup almanac, because it doesn't exist out there. And the FIFA has always done great post-tournament technical reports that'll list like, here's everyone who scored, here's everyone who assists, here's all the PKs, here's all the red cards, stuff like that. They've kind of stopped doing that. It's really weird. Now these reports that come out, they're much more performance-based, and the data analytics and, well, these people ran the most, and like all that stuff is fascinating, but that doesn't help with any of the historical stuff.
Right.
So that's kind of a thing for me. And, one of the things that I'm most proud of related to women's soccer stats is, because of how much I was delving into the media guides 10 years ago, I ended up changing Christine Lilly's World Cup record, CAP world record. She had 352 caps, and it's a whole other story. I'll send you a link to it because I did a presentation on it a few years back. But I ended up finding 2 caps that U.S. Soccer had not counted in their total. So she's now at 354 caps without having to do a thing. She's
except look it up.
Yeah.
So one final question here. You work for NWSL and you do World Cup with Fox and other events and the Olympics with NBC. 30 years ago, little more than 30 years ago, you became a big soccer fan, right? Is there enough work in all of this to make a career? This is the career, and you get to sort of, cobble all that stuff together into a super existence here?
Well, and I would say, 5 years ago, there wasn't. But due to the tremendous growth of NWSL, not just the league getting bigger and the league getting more stable, but the media partnerships with the league, right? That the league has every Friday night, there's a game on Prime. Every Saturday night, there's a doubleheader on ION. Regular games on CBS and CBS Sports, regular games on ESPN, ESPN2. We'll even have playoff games on ABC, right? And the final will be on big CBS in prime time on a Saturday night, right? And then next year you've got, Vice Plus coming in. They want to do, something on Sundays. Like, because of that, there's this whole infrastructure, as you well know, that comes with broadcast. So, hey, if you're going to have announcers and halftime shows, like ION, this is their second season that they did a pre-game, halftime, bridge show, halftime. Like, there's got to be a lot of support for that. So it's been so nice to see, not just, for me and what I do, but that it's like we see a few more soccer reporters getting hired. We're seeing, these CBS has a lot of people that are doing soccer research, right? That there's more opportunity for that. There's more college soccer that's getting streamed in a much more professional way, right? Yeah. It's not just, okay, well, they found a student to sit in the stands and call the game. No, it's an actual, it's a real production.
Yeah.
I remember, must have been 2018. That was the second year that NWSL was doing all of its streams out of Florida. And I was in the studios in Florida, and we saw this tweet that someone said, today there are 29 professional soccer games being played today. That's the most ever in U.S. history, the number of professional games played on the same day.
On that day.
On that day, yeah. And that record's already been broken. And I just remember that our producer was like, and most of them are being produced in this building.
Yeah, that's right.
But they're just in like Florida, the incredible growth. Yeah. And then we haven't even talked about like what, the USL Women's Super League is doing. You've got USL Championship, just the UWS, W League. Like there's so much growth. And then to see Canada finally launch its own league this year, the women's league in Mexico is getting stronger and stronger. Yeah. And, I love that, we do see occasionally an American, going over to Chelsea or something like that. And to me, it is not a sign of panic. To me, it is like, how amazing is that an American born, American raised, American trained soccer player is deemed good enough to, go over there. And it's not like there would be a big exodus, right? We know those rosters. There's limited teams in Europe, as we know, on the men's side team that will spend the really big bucks, right? Yeah. So, but to me, like the growth of the women's game in all areas is amazing. And hey, I am so thrilled what it means for me personally, but also for other people that I'm seeing more and more work related to stats.
And the good news is, Jen, they couldn't do this without you. So that's your story, and we're sticking with it, right?
Yes, John. Yes.
Good. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. This has been fun.
Great. Thank you, John.
With NWSL, Olympics with NBC, World Cup and others with Fox Sports, and I don't know, I guess you don't have time for anything else. So there you go.
Very true. Very true.
There you go. Great. Thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks again to Jen Cooper, and it's going to be a very busy weekend. The second weekend in November, the round of 8 in the playoffs in the NWSL. Before we wrap it up, if you're looking to stay on top of the game, check out Soccer America. Members get the daily Soccer on TV schedule and a daily digest of the top soccer stories in their inbox every morning. Plus, you get the coverage of the biggest matches from all around the world. You can try it free for 30 days at socceramerica.com/free trial. That's socceramerica.com/free trial. And while you're here, you can check like and subscribe and check the links in the description and get notified when our new episodes drop.
And now the answer to the Soccer America Trivia Quiz. There have been 11 NWSL champions. 2 of those were coached by women head coaches. The first one in the inaugural season of 2013, the Portland Thorns were coached by Cindy Parlow-Cone, who is, of course, now the U.S. Soccer president. Canadian Rian Wilkinson won the title with the Thorns in 2022. There have been 2 American-raised head coaches who have won NWSL championships, of course, Cindy Parlow-Cone, and the second one is Chris Ward in 2021 with the Washington Spirit.
Thanks to Mike Waitala, and thanks to you for being with us. And we hope you can like us, you can subscribe, you can pass the word. We're here every week, the Soccer Media Podcast, presented by Soccer America. I'm John Shrader for Mike Waitala. We'll see you next time.